My name is Laura. I'm 22, and I never believed in moments that changed everything. I thought life unraveled slowly, like a war, not thread, nothing sudden, nothing dramatic, just the quiet ache of time. But then came that night. A night I didn't expect, wrapped in silence and breath and a stranger's presence. And somehow it managed to change everything I thought I knew. I remember the weight of that door closing behind me, not heavy in sound, but in feeling. I'd walked into that room numb, my chest hollowed out by too many goodbye texts, too many fake smiles, too many people who held me until I needed something real. The kind of real that doesn't run away when your voice shakes or when your walls begin to crack. I wasn't running from something. I was running to the only place where no one expected anything from me, where no one even knew my name. It wasn't supposed to be occupied. I booked the cabin for myself, just a weekend away, somewhere quiet, somewhere lost in the woods where the trees could listen better than people did. So when I opened the door and saw a bag by the chair, my chest tightened. For a moment, I froze. I thought maybe I was intruding. Maybe I got the date wrong. But then I heard the water running, the shower, and suddenly I wasn't alone. Panic didn't come first. Strangely, it was calm. Maybe the kind of calm that happens when you're too tired to feel anything else. I sat down on the edge of the couch and waited. When he came out, towel slung across his shoulder, hair damp and skin kissed by steam, he looked at me the way someone looks at the edge of a dream, trying to remember if they're still asleep. Neither of us raised our voices. We talked quietly, cautiously, and learned that the booking was a glitch, some odd system overlap. He was just as confused as I was, maybe even more so. His name was Jace. He offered to leave. I didn't let him. It sounds strange, I know, but I didn't want him to go, not because of attraction, not because of some instant pull, but because something in him felt just as tired as I was. We didn't ask questions that night. We just stayed in the same room, opposite corners, barely speaking. I poured myself tea. He leaned against the wall. We didn't pretend we were comfortable, but we weren't pretending anything at all, and maybe that was the part that made me stay. By midnight, I was lying in the bed, curled toward the window. The storm outside had started to hum low and steady, like a lullaby you don't remember learning. I heard his voice quiet, saying he'd take the floor. I said no. There was space, plenty of it, and something in my voice told him I meant more than the bed. I meant stay. I meant, don't leave me alone with this ache inside me. He didn't move closer. He just climbed in on the other side, careful, like he didn't want to disturb whatever quiet spell had settled in the room. We didn't touch. We didn't talk. The space between us was wide enough to hold two pasts we didn't want to explain. But that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safe, not from danger. Safe from the noise, from expectations, from the pressure to smile when you're breaking. I never expected comfort to come from unfamiliar arms. But lying there beside him, hearing nothing but his steady breathing, I felt my body soften in ways I hadn't let it in months. It wasn't the warmth of love. It was the quiet kindness of not being alone, of being near someone who didn't need me to perform strength. I don't know if he even knew what he gave me. Maybe he just needed the same thing. Maybe his silence was his own form of surrender. When morning came, I opened my eyes slowly, afraid he'd be gone. He wasn't. He was still there, still asleep, one hand over his chest, the other resting near the pillow we didn't share. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched the light from the window settle across his face, and in that stillness, something in me healed just a little. I had come to that cabin to escape, but instead I found something I didn't know I needed. Not love, not yet, just the fragile miracle of being seen, even if only in silence. The bed was still. The air between us barely moved. I lay on my side, curled in on myself like I'd done so many nights before. Only this time I wasn't alone. He was behind me, not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could feel the weight of his presence. It was quiet, almost too quiet, yet somehow that silence didn't feel empty. It felt like it knew, like it had been waiting for me to stop pretending everything was fine. I didn't cry, not that night. Not even after the kind of pain that leaves a person hollow. Sometimes pain goes so deep it doesn't even know how to surface anymore. It just lives inside you, heavy and unspoken. That's how I felt. Like something had shattered in me long before I walked into that cabin, and I had learned how to carry the broken pieces without letting anyone see the blood. He hadn't asked me anything, not when we sat in the room, not when we climbed into the same bed as strangers. He didn't ask why I booked the cabin alone. He didn't ask what I was running from, and maybe that's why I let my guard down, because he wasn't trying to fix me. He didn't offer words, just silence, and somehow that meant more than any comfort I'd ever been given. When someone tries to make it better, it can feel like they're telling you to hurry up and stop feeling. But when someone says nothing, when they just exist beside you, without trying to shape your sadness into something more digestible, it gives you space to breathe. And I hadn't breathed in a long time. That night, wrapped in that unfamiliar stillness, I remembered things I had tried to forget. The way I used to laugh without thinking. The way I once believed in forever, until someone used that word like a weapon. I had given my heart to someone who promised to be different. He told me he saw me like no one else did. He said I made him feel alive, and I believed him. God, I believed every word, until the silence between our messages grew longer. Until the warmth in his voice turned cold, until one day he stopped looking at me like I was the one, and started looking past me, like I was just a chapter he had outgrown. I gave too much, that's the truth. I gave until there was nothing left for me, and when he walked away, he took more than just his things. He took the version of me that believed I was enough. So there I was, lying beside someone who knew none of that, and yet somehow I felt more understood than I ever had. I didn't need him to say anything. I didn't need him to reach out. His silence was like an open door, inviting but never forcing, and it was in that stillness that I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't healing, not yet, but it was the beginning, the first moment where I didn't feel like I had to hide the ache in my chest. He was a stranger, yes, but he wasn't unsafe. There was no expectation, no pressure, no pretending. He simply was, and in a world that always seemed to want something from me, his quiet was the gentlest thing I'd known in months. As I lay there, eyes open to the dark ceiling, I wanted to say something. Not a story, not an explanation, just something honest, but nothing came, and maybe that was okay. Maybe silence said it all. Maybe that night wasn't about what was spoken, but about what was felt. The quiet way broken things recognize each other. The way stillness can sometimes say, I see you, without making a sound. I didn't know what the next day would bring. I didn't know if we'd speak, or if we'd part without ever exchanging more than a few scattered words. But I knew I would remember that night, not because of who he was, but because of what he gave me without knowing it. My heart was broken, but silence held me like it understood. I didn't mean to fall asleep. Not fully. I'd been lying there, pretending I was somewhere else, pretending the ache in my chest was quiet, pretending I didn't feel the heat of him lying just inches away. The silence between us had stretched on for hours, and still it didn't feel awkward. If anything, it felt like the only thing in the world that made sense. I'd spent so long avoiding this kind of nearness. After everything I'd been through, touch had become something I couldn't trust. I used to crave it, used to find comfort in the way someone would hold my hand, press their palm to my back, brush hair from my face like it meant something. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being gentle. It became a promise people made with their hands but never kept with their hearts. And now, even the idea of it made me flinch on the inside. But that night, something was different. We hadn't spoken since the quiet exchange over the cabin, hadn't said much beyond what was necessary. There was no flirting, no effort to impress, just shared air and unsaid understanding. The storm outside had faded into a low hum, and the only sound left was the rise and fall of his breath. I had my back to him, still curled like I could hide from everything. But I wasn't hiding. I was waiting. I didn't know for what. At some point, maybe out of instinct, maybe out of something deeper, I shifted slightly, just enough for my elbow to graze his arm. It wasn't on purpose. It wasn't dramatic, just a soft, accidental touch, but it was enough. He didn't pull away. He didn't lean in either. He just stayed still, and then, slowly, like the kind of movement that asks permission without words, I felt his fingers graze the back of my hand. Barely there, a whisper of skin against skin. My body froze, not out of fear, but because of the way that one small touch sent something spiraling through me that I didn't think I was ready to feel again. It wasn't just physical. It wasn't about wanting. It was about being known, about being seen in the dark by someone who didn't need to know your past to understand your present. His touch didn't ask for anything. It didn't expect. It simply offered, and in that offering, something cracked open in me. I turned my hand slightly, not enough to fully meet his, but enough to let him know he hadn't imagined it, that I felt it too. That I wasn't running, not this time, and that's when it hit me. The feeling, the one I thought I'd buried under months of numbness, the one I swore I'd never let myself feel again. Realness, the terrifying, beautiful weight of something that wasn't shallow or passing. It didn't even have a name yet, but it was there, it was forming, and I didn't know if I was strong enough to carry it. His hand moved again, this time with more certainty. Fingers laced gently with mine, like he was trying to tell me he wouldn't hurt me. That this moment was enough, that I didn't have to give more than what I was ready to give. My heart beat so hard it felt like it might bruise my ribs. It wasn't lust. It wasn't longing. It was something quieter, something deeper. A connection that wasn't supposed to exist between strangers, but somehow did. The touch was gentle, but the feeling was dangerously real. I didn't come to that cabin looking for anything, not closure. Not clarity, definitely not comfort. I just wanted to breathe without someone asking me what was wrong. I wanted silence that didn't feel like a punishment. I wanted space, the kind of space where no one expected me to be okay. That's all, just space and air and distance from the noise I couldn't explain anymore. People always say healing starts when you seek it, but I wasn't seeking anything. I didn't even think I could be healed. I was just tired, tired of being strong, tired of being told it would get better, tired of pretending the ache in my chest didn't still wake me up in the middle of the night. I wasn't looking for hope. I had already let it go somewhere along the way. I was just surviving, quietly, carefully, alone, and yet somehow something found me anyway. It didn't happen in some dramatic, soul-shaking moment. It didn't look like the kind of thing that changes a life. It looked like mismatched bookings and awkward introductions, and two people too emotionally worn down to force small talk. I didn't even realize it at first. Not when he said he'd leave, not when I told him he didn't have to, not when we sat on opposite sides of the room in shared silence. I thought I was just being kind. I thought he was just being respectful. We were two strangers caught in the same stillness, that's all, but there was something in the way he occupied the space around me. He didn't try to fill it, he didn't try to own it, he just let it be, And in that quiet, something started to settle in me that I hadn't felt in a long time. Presence. Not attention, not performance, just real, grounded presence. That first night, we didn't say much, a few sentences here and there, mostly silence, but not the kind that makes your skin crawl, the kind that lets your shoulders drop, the kind that doesn't need fixing. I hadn't realized how starved I was for that kind of quiet, the safe kind, the kind that wraps around you like a blanket you forgot you needed. He didn't know my story. I didn't offer it. I wasn't ready to say out loud how deeply I'd been let down. How I gave my trust to someone who looked me in the eyes and promised forever, only to leave when it no longer served him. I wasn't ready to speak about the nights I spent questioning my worth, trying to be enough for someone who always made me feel like too much or not quite enough. I didn't want to explain how it broke me, how I stopped expecting anything real from anyone. But somehow, sitting in that room with someone I barely knew, I felt more seen than I had in months. I wasn't searching for connection. I wasn't searching for understanding. I certainly wasn't searching for someone to lie beside me in the dark. And yet, when it happened, when we both ended up in the same bed, separated by a cautious space and 1,000 unspoken fears, it didn't feel wrong. It felt like something I didn't know I needed until it was there. It wasn't about romance, not yet. It wasn't about attraction or desire. It was about stillness, about sharing the night with someone who didn't ask anything from me except the truth of my silence. I felt the world slow down. I felt my chest loosen. I felt the version of me I had buried, soft, tender, trusting, begin to stir beneath the weight of all I had been carrying. I don't know if he felt it too. I didn't ask. I couldn't. It felt too fragile to speak out loud, like a snowflake you can't touch without melting it. But I know something changed in the way I breathed, in the way I let go, even just for a moment, of all the reasons I had built walls so high no one could reach me. Sometimes what saves you doesn't look like rescue. Sometimes it's just a quiet presence, a shared breath, a stranger who becomes a mirror, showing you a version of yourself you thought you lost. I wasn't searching for anything, but something found me anyway. It's strange how one night, just one, can press itself so deeply into you that it feels like it's always been there, like it didn't happen yesterday or last week, but lives inside you the way childhood does. Faded around the edges, but permanent in all the places that matter. I didn't plan for it to mean anything. I didn't expect it to stay, but that night blurred everything, memory, meaning, even the lines I swore I wouldn't cross again. It started quietly, the way all things do when your heart is still healing. He hadn't tried to get close. He hadn't asked for anything. We were just sharing space, the kind of space that feels safe because nothing is being asked of you. Not your smile, not your story, not even your strength. I remember watching the light shift across the room, shadows dancing along the floorboards like they knew something I didn't. And in the middle of it all, there he was, steady, quiet, present. We hadn't touched. Not really. There was still space between us, still that careful line neither of us had tried to erase. But the silence was different now. It wasn't just an absence of sound. It was full of tension, full of questions we didn't have the courage to ask, full of whatever had started building in the hours we spent near each other, not talking about the ache we both clearly carried. I didn't want to feel it. I didn't want to want anything. I was still holding the pieces of a heart someone else had cracked in half and left behind like it didn't matter. I had spent months trying to forget what love felt like, trying to unlearn the way my body remembered being held like a promise that was never kept. And yet, in the quiet of that cabin, I felt it all coming back, not because he did anything, but because he didn't. He didn't reach for me. He didn't try to fix me. He just laid there, breathing slowly, like he had all the time in the world to let me decide who I wanted to be in that moment. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel broken. I just felt human, whole, somehow, in a way I couldn't explain. I turned toward him slowly, like the movement itself might break the spell. And his eyes were already open, already watching me, not in a way that made me feel exposed, but in a way that made me feel seen, truly seen, not for my pain, not for my past, but for whatever was happening between us right then. Something wordless, something fragile, something real. I don't remember who moved first. I just remember warmth, the brush of his fingers against mine, the way his hand hesitated, as if asking without asking, and the way mine answered before my thoughts could stop it. Our palms met like they had done this before, like they knew something we didn't, and then, without planning, without fear, I leaned in, not for a kiss, not for some grand romantic gesture, just to be near, just to let my forehead rest against his shoulder, to let my breath fall where his did, to let myself be held without the weight of expectation. That's all it was. That's all we did. We stayed like that for what felt like hours. Breathing, sharing silence, letting the moment become whatever it needed to be. And in that space between closeness and restraint, something inside me shifted. The walls I'd built didn't come crashing down. They just stopped mattering, because in that single night, something beautiful happened. Something I wasn't ready for and didn't understand. It didn't scream for my attention. It didn't demand anything. It simply existed, soft, steady, unforgettable. It blurred the lines between what was memory and what was meaning, between what I thought I was escaping and what I was actually finding. The past didn't vanish. The pain didn't disappear. But in those quiet hours beside someone who held space for me without needing to know every broken part, I stopped feeling like a wound. I started to feel like maybe I could be something more than what hurt me. Maybe I already was. A single night blurred the lines between memory and meaning. The room was quiet when I woke, but not empty. Light crept in through the thin curtains, painting soft lines across the wall. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The sheets, the scent in the air, the unfamiliar hush, it wasn't home. And yet, I didn't feel misplaced. I didn't feel the usual rush of panic that came with waking somewhere new. I just felt still, not numb, not hollow, just still. He hadn't moved much during the night. I could tell by the way the blanket stayed gently gathered between us, like it had respected our cautious boundary. I hadn't turned to face him after I leaned in. I hadn't needed to. The closeness had been enough. His presence had wrapped around me in ways words never could. And even now, as sunlight slowly filled the cabin, I could still feel it, what it meant to share silence and not feel alone inside it. So much had changed in that one night, though nothing dramatic had happened. We didn't confess secrets. We didn't touch in ways that would leave us tangled in regret. There were no bold declarations, no sweeping gestures. Just breathe, quiet understanding, and the simple nearness of someone who didn't ask me to be more than I was. I don't know when it shifted, when the silence between us became something comforting instead of heavy. But I do know that, in the softness of those shared hours, something in me stopped bracing, for pain, for abandonment, for the disappointment that usually followed any moment of vulnerability. I didn't expect him to save me. I didn't want saving. I just wanted to exist without feeling like I had to prove my worth every second, and somehow he gave me that without saying a word. I remember lying there in the middle of the night, listening to the way he breathed, slow, steady, not too deep, like he wasn't trying to control anything, like he was just allowing the night to hold him, the same way I was. I turned my face toward the space between us once, and I could see the faint rise of his chest, the curve of his shoulder. He looked peaceful, and for a few seconds I let myself imagine what it would feel like to be close enough to rest against that calm. But I didn't move. I didn't have to. The moment already held more weight than touch could carry. I didn't sleep much after that. My body was tired, but my heart was quiet in a way it hadn't been for so long. So I stayed there, awake but not restless, and let the hours pass in silence. Let the memories come and go. Let the ache of the past hum softly in the background without letting it pull me under. Morning arrived gently, no alarms, no voices, just light, and the slow, reluctant return to the world outside of that night. I turned onto my back and stared at the ceiling, trying to hold onto whatever peace had found me. The weight of what I'd been carrying didn't disappear, but it felt different, softer at the edges. Not because he changed me, but because he didn't ask me to change. He just stayed. We didn't speak right away. We didn't rush to fill the space with noise, and I was grateful for that. Because I needed time to gather myself, to prepare for the moment when I'd have to step back into the world where people expected me to smile and say, "I'm fine," even when I wasn't. I looked over at him just once to see if he was awake. He was. His eyes were open, looking up at the ceiling just like mine had been. We didn't exchange more than a glance, but it was enough. In that one look, there was acknowledgement of the night we shared, of the silence that had held us both, of the way two strangers had found something like peace in the softest, most unexpected place. I got up first, quietly, gathered my things, brushed my hair with shaking hands, even though I didn't know why I felt so moved. Maybe because I knew I'd never fully explain what that night meant. Maybe because I knew I'd carry it with me, tucked away in the parts of me that rarely see the light. Some nights fade, some get forgotten, overwritten by routine and time. But not that one. That night stayed, not loud, not obvious, just present. In the way I breathed more calmly afterward, in the way I stopped shrinking myself around people, in the way I finally understood that presence doesn't always need words to heal. Morning came, but part of me stayed in that night forever. I didn't say goodbye the way people usually do. There were no long pauses, no promises made, no dramatic look back, no whispered maybe someday. Just a quiet nod. A gentle smile, a moment held, then released. Some part of me wanted to stay not because I thought something would grow from it, but because something already had. Something small, something real, something I didn't know I was still capable of feeling. But I knew better than to chase something that was never meant to be caught. He was a chapter. A still, quiet page in a book I didn't know was still being written. And maybe I was the same for him, a soft pause in a life full of noise. I walked away with nothing in my hands, but more in my heart than I ever expected. He didn't fix me. He didn't need to. Sometimes healing begins not with answers, but with being allowed to simply exist without judgment, without expectation. And that night will always be mine, unspoken, untouched, undone, but unforgettable. So this isn't goodbye to him. Not really. It's goodbye to who I was before that night, to the girl who thought she'd never feel safe again, to the heart that believed it had to stay broken to protect itself. I left, but something stayed behind the silence, the warmth, the softness I thought I lost. I carry that now, quietly, gratefully. And always thank you for listening. Until next time.